Hello, everybody. Welcome to Vitamin for the Soul, where we explore small, practical ways to nourish your mind, body, and spirit. I'm Tony Reyna. I am going to be your host, and I'm so glad you're here today. In today's episode, we're going to talk about those moments when you feel an emotional pull, when something or someone just gets under your skin and you can't seem to let it go. We'll explore what these emotional hooks are, why they happen, and how we can approach them with curiosity and compassion. If you've ever felt stuck in a cycle of reacting or overthinking, stick around. This episode is for you. So let's start by identifying what I mean by an emotional hook. Think about a time when you felt a sudden emotional reaction, like someone said or did something that instantly made your blood boil or your heart sink. Maybe it was a coworker who criticized your work in front of others, or a loved one who forgot something important to you. That moment when your chest tightens, your mind races, and you feel an overwhelming need to act, that's your emotional hook. Hooks show up differently for everyone. For some, it's anger that flares up when they feel dismissed. For others, it's shame that probably creeps in when they feel like they've made a mistake. The common thread is that these hooks grab hold of us and pull us into patterns of reaction that often don't serve us. They make us lash out, shut down, or spiral into overthinking. And here's the tricky part. Most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening until we've already caught it in the loop. The concept of emotional hooks isn't about blaming yourself for feeling what you feel. It's about recognizing that these reactions are part of being human. They're often tied to deeper fears of insecurities, things like the fear of rejection, failure, or not being good enough. These fears have a way of triggering automatic responses that can leave us feeling stuck or overwhelmed. Here's an example you might relate to. Imagine you're driving and someone cuts you off in traffic. For many of us, the immediate reaction is frustration or even anger. You might honk your horn, yell, or stew about it for the next 15 minutes. But if you pause and think about it, what's really happening? The hook might be tied to a feeling of being disrespected or a fear of being out of control. It's not just about the other driver. It's about what their action triggered inside of you. And this is where awareness comes in. The first step to freeing yourself from these emotional hooks is simply noticing them. What situations or interactions tend to set you off? When do you feel that pull towards reacting without thinking? By observing these moments, you can start to uncover the deeper patterns at play. Now, as we go through the episode, we'll explore how to build that awareness and begin the process of unhooking ourselves from these automatic reactions. But for now, just take a moment to think about your own life. What are the situations that seem to hook you the most? Maybe it's a certain tone of voice, a specific person, or even something as simple as feeling ignored. Whatever it is, that's where we'll begin. Let me take you back to a moment that really helped me understand the power of these emotional hooks and how they work. It was during a conversation with someone close to me, a friend I've known for years. We were talking about a project I had been working on, something I was proud of, but also a little bit nervous. At one point, he said something that felt critical. It wasn't mean-spirited, but it came off as dismissive, like they didn't take my efforts seriously. In that instant, I felt a flood of emotions. My chest tightened, my thoughts raced, and I could feel the sting of defensiveness rising up. My immediate action was to jump in and explain myself, justify why I was doing what I was doing, prove to them that my project was worthwhile. But as I started to respond, I caught myself. I realized I was reacting, not responding. Something in me was hooked, and I needed to figure out what it was. So I paused, I took a deep breath, and I asked myself, what's really bothering me here? Why do I feel so upset? And as I sat with it, I realized that their comment wasn't really the problem. The hook was tied to my own fear of not being good enough, of putting myself out there and not being taken seriously. It was my own insecurity that made their words sting more than they needed to. That realization was powerful because it shifted the way I approached the situation. Instead of lashing out or getting defensive, I decided to let the comment be what it is, or what it was, a reflection of their opinion, not a definition of my worth. And you know what? The moment passed. I didn't have to prove myself to them because I knew what I was doing was meaningful to me. This was such a simple moment, but it taught me so much about how hooks operate. They're like emotional tripwires. When someone steps on them, and then we go into a fight or flight mode. But the truth is, the real work isn't about the other person or the situation itself. It's about looking inward and understanding what's being triggered inside of us. Here's the thing. I still get hooked. I'm only human. We all do. But now I try to see those moments as opportunities and not failures. Every time I catch myself getting hooked, it's a chance to pause, reflect, and choose a different response. It's not about being perfect. It's about being aware. Maybe you've had a moment like this too. Maybe someone said something that rubbed you the wrong way, and before you knew it, you were deep in an argument or replaying the conversation over and over in your mind. If that sounds familiar, don't worry, you're not alone. These moments are part of being human. The good news is once you start noticing them, you can begin to unhook yourself and find a little more peace in your day-to-day life. Now that we've explored what emotional hooks are and how they show up, let's talk about how to recognize them in your own life. Because the truth is, you can't change what you don't notice. And often these hooks are so automatic that we don't even realize they're happening until we're already caught up in the cycle. So how do you start to see them more clearly? The first step is to pay attention to your body. Our emotions don't just live in our minds, they live in our bodies. When you get hooked, there's often a physical response. Maybe your shoulders tense up, your jaw tightens, or your heart races. These are signals that something has triggered you. So the next time you feel a wave of emotion, whether it's anger, sadness, or even frustration, pause and do a quick body scan. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now, physically? This simple step can help you slow down and create a moment of awareness. Another way to recognize your hooks is to listen to the stories your mind tells you. For example, let's say you're in a meeting and someone interrupts you. Your immediate thought would probably be, they don't respect me, or I'm never taken seriously. These thoughts are part of a hook. They fuel the emotional reaction. But here's the thing. Just because a thought feels true doesn't mean it is true. The stories we tell ourselves are often shaped by past experiences or insecurities. So when you notice these stories popping up in your mind, take a moment to question them. Ask yourself, is this really true? Or is this my fear talking? Triggers can also show up in patterns. Are there certain people or situations that always seem to push your buttons? Maybe it's a coworker who constantly talks over you, or a family member who brings up the same sensitive topic every time you see them. These recurring hooks are like road signs. They point to areas in your life where you might feel vulnerable or unresolved. Instead of avoiding these patterns, try to approach them with curiosity. What is it about the situation that bothers you? What does it bring up for you emotionally? The more you understand your triggers, the less power they have over you. One practice I found helpful is journaling. At the end of the day, take a few minutes to reflect on moments when you felt hooked. Write down what happened, how you felt, and what thoughts or reactions came up. Over time, you might notice patterns. Maybe you realize that you're more likely to feel hooked when you're tired or stressed, or maybe you see that certain environments, like work meetings or social gatherings, tend to bring out specific reactions. This kind of self-awareness is key to breaking free from those automatic patterns. It's also important to approach this process with kindness. Recognizing your hooks isn't about blaming yourself or trying to fix everything all at once. It's about learning to see yourself with compassion and understanding. When you catch yourself getting hooked, instead of saying, "Why do I keep doing this?" try saying, "Oh, there it is again. I see it." That gentle acknowledgement creates space for change. Here's something to try this week. When you notice a strong emotional reaction, pause, take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself, what am I feeling in my body right now? What story is my mind telling me? What might this situation be pointing to? You don't need to come up with solutions right away. Just practice noticing. That awareness is the first and most important step to unhooking yourself. With time and practice, you'll start to see these hooks not as a problem, but as opportunities to understand yourself more deeply. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes to choose a response instead of falling into reaction. Now that we've talked about recognizing your hooks and understanding your emotional triggers, let's focus on how you can put this awareness into practice in your everyday life. Awareness is powerful, but it becomes transformative when you pair it with action. That's what I want to guide you through this week. A simple, practical way to start unhooking yourself and reclaiming your peace. The practice I'm about to share is straightforward, but it can have a profound impact if you stick with it. Here's what I want you to do this week. The next time you feel triggered or emotionally hooked, pause and take 3 deep breaths. Just pause and breathe. That's it. You don't have to solve the problem, respond to a situation, or fix how you're feeling right away. All you're doing in the moment is creating a little bit of space between the trigger and your reaction. Why is this so important? Because when we're hooked, we're often in reactive mode. Our body goes into fight, flight, or freeze, and our mind starts spinning stories. By pausing and breathing, you will interrupt the automatic cycle. You give yourself a chance to step back and observe what's really happening, rather than getting swept up in it. Once you've taken these 3 breaths, ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, what am I feeling in my body right now? Number 2, what story is my mind telling me? And number 3, what do I need in this moment? These questions help you bring curiosity and compassion to your experience rather than judgment. You're not trying to fix the feeling or make it go away. You're simply just noticing it. Let me give you an example of how this might play out. Imagine you're at work and a colleague makes a comment that feels dismissive. Your first instinct might be to snap back, shut down, or start overthinking, but instead you pause. You take 3 deep breaths. You notice your shoulders are tense and your chest feels tight. You feel the story your mind is telling. You don't respect me, or I'm not good enough. And then you ask yourself, what do I need right now? Maybe the answer is kindness towards yourself, or maybe it's a reminder that their comment doesn't define your worth. Whatever it is, you've just created space for a response rather than a reaction. For some of you, this practice might feel uncomfortable at first, and that's okay. We're so used to reacting that slowing down can feel unfamiliar or even frustrating. But remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Even if you catch yourself after the fact, maybe hours or days later, that's still a win. Awareness takes time to build, and every little step counts. To deepen this practice, I encourage you to keep a journal. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to reflect on any moments when you felt hooked. Write down what happened, how you felt, and what you noticed about your reaction. This simple habit can help you uncover patterns and bring more awareness to your triggers. Here's another tip. Be gentle with yourself. Emotional hooks are part of being human. You're not going to unhook yourself from every trigger overnight, and that's okay. What matters is that you're showing up, you're noticing, and taking small steps towards changing. It's a process, and it's one that's worth the effort. So this week, remember, pause, breathe, and notice. That's your practice. And if you'd like to share your experiences, I'd love to hear from you. So leave a comment about what you noticed or what you're learning. You never know, your story might inspire someone else who's going through something similar. This is just the beginning of a journey towards greater awareness and freedom. And as you start to recognize and work with your hooks, you'll find that they have less and less power over you. You'll be able to respond with clarity instead of reacting with emotion. And that, my friends, is where true freedom begins. As we come to the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've covered and how it connects to the bigger picture of your personal growth. Emotional hooks, those moments when we feel pulled into automatic reactions, are a universal human experience. But they're not something we're powerless against. By learning to recognize these hooks and practicing simple tools like pausing, breathing, and observing, you're taking the first steps towards breaking free from old patterns and reclaiming your inner peace. And I want to leave you with an important reminder. This process isn't about perfection. It's about progress. It's okay to get hooked sometimes. We all do. What matters is that you're starting to notice, starting to create space between the trigger and the reaction. Each time you pause, even for just a moment, you're building a new habit of awareness and self-compassion. And over time, those moments will add up to real, lasting change. This week's practice, pausing and breathing when you feel hooked, may seem small, but it's incredibly powerful. Think of it like planting a seed. With each moment of awareness, you're actually nurturing that seed and giving it space to grow. Eventually, it will blossom into something beautiful, a calmer, more grounded way of living. So before we wrap up, I want to invite you to share your journey with me. Have you noticed any patterns or triggers in your life? What was it like to pause and breathe instead of reacting? Your experiences can inspire and encourage others who are walking the same path as you. So if you feel comfortable, leave a comment or share this episode with someone who might benefit from it. Let's start a conversation and build a community of support. And don't forget, this is just the first step. So in coming episodes, we'll dive deeper into mindfulness as a tool for unhooking yourself and finding peace in the middle of life's chaos. It's a practice that has transformed my own life, and I can't wait to share it with you. So thank you for joining me on this episode of Vitamin for the Soul. Remember, every step you take towards awareness and freedom is a step worth celebrating. So take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode.